Меня зовут Linda Wlasoff. My name is Linda Wilkinson, Linda Wlasoff Wilkinson. And I was brought up in the Doukhobor community in Grand Forks. And I have all kinds of stories that I could tell about my grandparents. The Wlasoff side of the family was part of the Sons of Freedom movement. And my other side, the Wlasoff side, came from Kamsack, Saskatchewan. And I think all my grandparents have roots in Saskatchewan. And they settled in Grand Forks. I remember years ago hearing an elderly Doukhobor. He was very elderly then. He remembered what his life had been like growing up in Russia as a Doukhobor, and how much he had suffered and how he had been beaten for being a Doukhobor. And getting to Canada was difficult. Living on the prairies was hard. And he finally got to Grand Forks, and he said, finally, he could rest. So here I am in Grand Forks, the place where I was born and raised, and I spent many years traveling in many parts of the world with my husband and family. I think I counted that we had moved maybe 12 times in the first 10 years of our marriage. We both loved to travel, and both of us worked at Selkirk College for many years. My husband taught English and creative writing and peace studies, and I taught English as a second language to students from all over the world. And that gave us a great opportunity to travel as well. I was a department head there and had a chance to meet students in their home countries. And that just gave me such an insight into who they were and where they came from. And it was always such a pleasure to see former students and have them show me around their home country, and their cities and their culture. And Myler came with me sometimes, and sometimes he went in one direction and I went in another. And many times we traveled together. And we were team teachers several times. We had a wonderful experience in China. And we had been asked to teach at a university, and then we were asked if we could go and talk to an elementary school class. I don't think I've told you this story. So there we were at an elementary school in a small city in China, large city by Canadian standards. Oh, they had so many children crammed into this one room. They all wanted to hear these Canadians, and if they wanted to know if they could understand them and if we could understand each other. Anyway, we talked to them about how happy we were to visit them and to hopefully be friends with them. And we told them a few things about Canada, and then we asked them if they had any questions. And there was a boy sitting at the back of the class, and he raised his hand. And he said, "Do you like me?" And Myler said, "No, I don't like you." And I thought, oh my God, what is Myler doing? Myler looked right at him and he said, "I love you." And he walked over to the boy and he took his hand. And every kid in that class raised their hand. And we spent the next 5 minutes making sure we took each one by their hand. I always say that that was Myler at his best. He surprised me, and it was just the perfect thing to say to that boy who asked if we liked him. So yes, we taught in Finland, we taught in China, we taught in Russia, we taught in Japan. We traveled together many places. And I took a program in peace studies in Austria, and I had a chance to meet students from all over the world. It was my first time really getting to know Africans. And I was so happy to get to know these African women from various countries and to hear from them what their lives had been like. And then Myler came. I went once on my own, the first semester, and the second semester Myler came with me. And it just made it even a richer experience. It was a very, very important time for us. And I guess my interest in travel, my interest in the world, has always stemmed from my desire to be a global citizen. And I can remember years ago, I was a student at Selkirk College, and I walked down a street and I saw a poster in a shop window, and it showed an image of the Earth from space, and it said, "The Earth is but one country, and mankind its citizens. Baha'u'llah." That is from the Baha'i writings. And I love that, the idea that, yes, we live on all of this earth. This is our home, our common home. And we have to learn how to live in this world as citizens of one world, as really one human family. And I remember growing up as a Doukhobor, I would always hear any introduction to a Doukhobor gathering begin with "Dear brothers and sisters." And I always thought that was very nice. And I remember once working in a restaurant, the Yale Hotel in Grand Forks, and most of the cooks were Doukhobors, which meant the food was very, very good. People would come from all over Canada because they heard that there was very good borscht at the Yale Hotel. And I remember one cook in particular, her brother was sitting in the restaurant, and he was a character. And, you know, his sister yelled at him, and she said, "You should listen to me, I'm your sister." And he looked at her and he said, "They're all my brothers and sisters." And I thought that that was such a delightful way to look at things. Yes, we have to listen to each other. We're all brothers and sisters. And I remember that I used to go to Russian school classes and outside of the English school. And at the end of the first 6 years of 2 times a week Russian, there was a seminar that was once a week. And it was in the Iskra office in the old co-op building. And I remember being very intrigued by the Russian library there. And I remember both my grandfathers were always reading. They were readers. And my grandfather Wlasoff had quite a selection of all the Russian classics by Tolstoy and Dostoevsky and Gorky, and he was always reading. I came from a long line of people who loved books. Unfortunately, or fortunately in my case, my Doukhobor family, my family didn't sing. We read books. So that seems to be where my interests always took me. In that library, there was a wonderful section that had books in English about Doukhobors and books by Tolstoy and Gandhi. And I wanted to know more about who I was, where I came from. And I remember going to that library and looking at those books and taking books out. And Eli Popov, who is really known as a Doukhobor historian, as is his son now after him, but Eli would often see me there and we would have talks. He'd ask me questions and I would ask him questions. And I was always very happy that I had that chance to talk to somebody who knew a lot about history. And it was really from looking at the history of where the Doukhobors came from, as well as listening to my grandparents' stories, and in particular, my great-grandmother, my babushka Danshana. She would tell me stories about her life in the Caucasus Mountains, in the Doukhobor villages, and how hard those days were. And I remember that one of her hands, her little finger, was quite bent. And I asked her, what happened? Why do you have such a crooked little finger? And she said that when she was just a little girl, she was helping her brother build a birdhouse. And he hit her hand with the hammer, and he broke her finger. And there was nowhere to go. There were no doctors. There was no one nearby who could fix her finger. She spent the rest of her life with that broken finger. And from that, I heard her stories of growing up in those villages and what it was like for her to move to Canada and get married at a young age and have, I think, 4 children. And her husband was killed in an accident when she was about 24. Her life was very hard. She had to learn how to live as a single mother. And I learned a lot from hearing her talk about what lives of women were like and how really hard it was. Anyway, all of that was part of my own history, hearing those stories, hearing my mother's stories of walking to school in Kamsack, Saskatchewan, walking 4 miles one way and 4 miles back, and how cold it was in winter. But she got to grade 5, I think. My father got to grade 6, and they wanted their children to have an education, the education they couldn't have. So we did. My sisters and my brother and I were able to go to university because their parents hadn't been able to do that. So as I was looking at those books in that old library in the Iskra building, near the Iskra offices, I realized that I wanted to know more about the world. And when I did think about this whole earth as being one country and all of us being one human family, I began to meet a few members of the Baha'i faith, the Baha'i community, and they answered whatever questions I had. I read whatever books I could get, and I began to see that really all of the religions of the world are like chapters in a book. We have Moses, we have Zoroaster, we have Krishna, we have Buddha, and they came at a certain time for a certain people. But really the teachings are very much the same. To love God and love each other, and to learn how to live together. And I think that what I began to see was really the Baha'i faith for me was the latest chapter, because now is the time. During the time of Christ, he could not have talked about global unity. He could not have talked about the earth being one country. We weren't ready for that, but he did give us his teachings about loving each other. And we made some progress. And as usual with humanity, a lot of setbacks along the way. We seem to learn things the hard way. And right now we're really faced with, wherever we look in the world, we can see things so immediately that there is suffering wherever we look. The wars, the situation for girls and women, whether in conflict zones or just in their everyday lives. We see this incredible materialism that has taken hold of us. People thinking that if they just get enough stuff, they'll be happy. And what I find as a Baha'i, that no, it's not about the stuff. It's about each other. How do we actually learn how to live together as brothers and sisters? As I had been taught to think about others as a Doukhobor. Yes, we're brothers and sisters. We don't always get along. We see that with in our Doukhobor communities, there are conflicts. In Indigenous communities, we have so much to learn as a country about how to treat the people that come here, that want to try and make a better life for their children, to try and make sure that their children have a chance to get an education. And we're not always kind to each other. I'm really so grateful that I was able to teach international students. I had a chance to get to know kids from all over the world. It was amazing how much we had in common. Sometimes I would ask the kids from different countries if they had listened to their grandparents' stories, and some of them really hadn't. And I said, when you go home, when you go back, ask them for their stories.